I used to live at a small farm in the US growing up, but as soon as I was 18, I moved out instantly, and I'll tell you why. When I was 12, me and my best friend Zach, who lived down the road, used to go into the woods to play. Since we lived in the country, there was almost nothing to do. We would always explore and pretend to be treasure hunters. I always used to take my dad's old cowboy hat, and Zach would take his small shovel every day. But if it was a bad day, we would just play some games on my Nintendo 64. This happened like 13 years ago, so it was the best you could get. We would always go a bit deeper into the forest every time we went in. We usually managed to find something interesting in the woods, like old coins, water bottles, some nice looking stones, and some other things. Yeah, I know, really lame stuff. But we were kids at the time, and we always thought of it as treasure. I had a small box under my bed to put the things I found in it, and so did Zach. We had an awesome childhood, but some creepy shit started happening over some time. One day, while we were exploring the forest again, we came across a well. We got really excited, thinking we actually found something good. We checked it out, but there was nothing special, and the well was dry. We pretty much got our hopes up for nothing. We headed back home, and another day was over. The next day was a Friday, and when we got back home from school, Zach went back to his house and I went back to mine. Not long after having lunch, Zach was at the door. I grabbed my dad's hat and opened the door. When I opened it, Zach was there with two other boys. They were much bigger than me and Zach. Zach introduced them as his cousins, saying they were staying with his mom and dad for the weekend. Their names were Danny and Simon. They were both 15, 3 years older than me and Zach. They wanted to come with me and Zach into the woods, and I agreed, so we went there. It was just a normal day for the most part. But Zach's cousins were total assholes, saying it sucked being in the woods and asking us how we never got bored out there. Later that night, around 11 at night, I got knocks at my bedroom window. It was Zach and his cousins. They told me to come down. I managed to get downstairs without awakening my parents. I opened the door and the cousins asked me if I wanted to go into the woods. I'd never been out there at night before, and to be honest, I didn't really want to go. And I told them that. Then they said, "Okay, you're a loss." They went off in the direction of a tree line. I changed my mind, grabbed my dad's hat, and ran after them. I caught up to them, and we started to walk deeper into the woods. I was scared shitless. And by the look on Zach's face, he was scared as well. The cousins stayed in front, shining their flashlights on the spooky trees. I noticed we were going in the direction of the well. I know the place like the back of my hand, so I had a plan in case shit hit the fan. We were coming up on the well, and suddenly, the cousins stopped and turned off their flashlights. We asked them what was wrong. They stood there, just like statues. Then we went around them, since we stayed behind them, and I froze as well. There was a person standing in front of the well, not looking in our direction, thankfully. I stood there like a statue, not knowing what to do. Then one of the cousins, I think it was Simon, he whispered, "Turn around slowly and walk away slowly. Don't make any sudden moves." I complied, and we all turned around and started walking back slowly, so that figure wouldn't notice us. Then the terrible happened. I stood on a stick by accident and made it snap. It was loud, and we weren't far away enough from that figure, so we all stopped again. I looked back, and the figure was now looking at us. I almost fainted with fear. Then Danny screamed, "Run!" We all floored it. I dropped my hat while running back, but I didn't stop to pick it up. I had no idea if the figure was following us, since all of our footsteps, they made it hard to make out. I didn't look back either, so I didn't know. We all managed to make it back safely. I ran into my house and slammed the door shut. My parents were awake, and I got shouted at by my parents and I was grounded for a week. But they also looked really relieved. My mom hugged me and said, "I'm so glad you're safe." I was confused and asked them what they were so worried about. Then they told me something that made me even more scared. They told me that recently an escaped killer was on the loose and he was last spotted in our area. And when my dad saw that I wasn't in my room, since he would usually check up on me, and the front door wasn't shut, they thought I had been kidnapped, and they were about to call the police right when I came through the door. After hearing that, I started crying. My parents asked me why. I told them what had happened. Their faces were full of horror after telling them that. They called the police immediately, and later on, they arrived. I explained everything to them. They said they would take a look into the woods, so they did. Half an hour later, they came back with nothing, but they said the next day they would bring more cops to search the area some more, and warned me not to go into the woods again. I obliged. I could barely sleep that night because I was so afraid that the man would come for me. The next day, more cops came to our farm and started investigating the woods. They also went to Zach's house. My mom came in and said she had found my dad's hat on the doorstep. I remember that last night I had dropped it. How did it get there? I thought about it some more, and the man in the woods came to mind. I started panicking again. My parents calmed me down and asked me what was wrong. I told them about the hat. They had nervous looks on their faces. My dad, he took the hat to the cop outside. I managed to calm him down again, and for the rest of the day, I just played video games, since my parents grounded me anyways. Around lunchtime, we got a knock at the door. I answered it. It was Zach and his mom. Zach's mom asked me if she could talk to my parents. I told my parents they were at the door. Then they told us to go into my room and play something. I put my ear against the door and listened. Zach's mom told my parents that Danny wasn't in the house in the morning, and after hearing the news about the creep in the woods, she began to worry. One thing didn't make sense though. All four of us made it out safely. I was confused. Then Zach told me something that scared the living shit out of me. He said Danny had left the house when they got back. He left while Simon and Zach were sleeping, although Zach wasn't sleeping. Zach said he looked out the window and saw him walk into the woods. He wanted to stop him, but he said he was scared to even go out there again. He never came back. I asked him why he left. Zach didn't know. Then Simon came over to hang out later on. I asked him if he knew why Danny left the house. He said he had an idea. Danny always used to carry around his dead mother's ring with him, since his mom had died a year prior to the events of this story. He always used to keep it in a box, and he would take it wherever he would go, and Simon checked the box in the morning, and it was empty. He must have dropped it while we were running from that guy last night, he said. After that day, as weeks went by, the guy in the woods was never caught. The cops started an investigation on Danny's disappearance. He was also never found. And me and Zach never went back into the woods again. Once we reached 18, we bought a house between each other and became roommates. Nothing's better than having a roommate as your best friend. I'm 25 now. I live with my girlfriend and I still hang out with Zach. But even after all that time, I still think about that night every day, and I probably will for the rest of my life. The following is a very true experience. I've never actually wrote this down before, and I don't know if anyone has experienced this too. This happened between 1989 and 1990, and I was about the age of 4 years old. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it, and I wonder if in some way unknown, it changed me. My parents had a house in the Inland Empire of Southern California, and at the time my brother hadn't been born yet, so I was still the only child. To give you a layout, my parents' house was a 2-story house located in a cul-de-sac. On the bottom floor there was 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, the living room, and the kitchen. The second floor was just the master bedroom and bath. All you could see from the street was the garage, and one of the bedroom windows on the bottom floor, and the window of my mom's bathroom on the second floor. To get to the front door, you had to walk along the cement pathway that ran along the side of the house. You had to pass the first bedroom that you see from the street. Then you pass the bathroom window, and then another bedroom window, and then you would be at the front door. The backyard was beyond that point. My bedroom at the time was the bedroom next to the front door. Now, for some reason, my blinds weren't completely down at the bottom of the window. There was about a 6-inch gap with nothing covering it. I was pretty young, so I didn't really care much about it then. The bed was in the middle of the wall across from my bedroom door, and to the left was the window. According to my mom, this all happened right before midnight. My mother was asleep in her room upstairs, and my dad was a policeman that worked nights in another city. I was fast asleep in my room, and out of nowhere I suddenly awoke, looking up at the ceiling. I don't know what woke me, or if I just popped awake on my own. After my eyes adjusted to the night's light of my bedroom, I sat up and started to look around in my room, and all of a sudden something caught my eye at the window, in the gap. First, I thought it was the street light reflecting on the window, but I knew for a fact that there was only one street light, and what I was looking at was two obvious glowing spots that were spaced apart as if on someone's face. Then I thought, is that a cat looking at me? And yes, I vividly remember looking and thinking these things, trying to debunk this at 4 years old. I had remembered then that my cat Chelsea's eyes would reflect at night, but this looked different than that. The cat's eyes would almost have different colors when reflecting. These were two very solid, bright white glowing eyes, looking straight at me. I just stared at them frozen stiff, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. I couldn't see a face at all. The eyes were just so bright, nothing else stood out. That void or face around the eyes looked blacker than the night. I thought again, well, if this is a cat, how could a cat be big like a person? And why would a cat stand up to stare in my bedroom? The curiosity got me and I went for it. I flipped my covers off, turned my little 4-year-old body towards the window, and put my feet on the floor. This is the moment the creepiest thing happened, and it will forever be burned into my brain. I got off the bed and got on my knees to get a closer look at this so-called cat, when at this very moment, this faceless pair of glowing white eyes begins to slowly and steadily tilt to the side, very similar to Michael Myers in Halloween, the eyes still locked on me. Not blinking once, the feeling of dread and fear shot through my body. Completely terrified, I burst into tears immediately and booked it down the hallway, through the living room, and up the stairs to tell my mom. Although I was going as fast as I could, it felt like it took forever. When I got to my mom, I was so upset. I couldn't get any words out. Tears were streaming down my face, and my mom was becoming seriously concerned at this point. She was able to calm me down, just enough for me to get out of the words, There's white eyes looking at me through my window, on the bottom. Stutter, crying hard. Are you sure? My mom asked. I cry out, yes. She didn't even go down to look. She just called the police. I don't remember the time it took for them to arrive, or what they said, because I finally fell asleep in my mom's bed. I do remember faintly waking up to a knock on the door, and my mom was going to open it. The cop speaks to her, and I hear her say, okay, thank you, good night, and she shuts the door. Did they find it, Mommy? I asked, half asleep. No, honey, he said they couldn't find anyone. My mom told me softly, it's okay now, just try to go back to sleep. It's safe to say that the next day, my whole window was covered. Years fast forward, and I'm in middle school now. Every now and then, I would think about that night. Sometimes I wondered if that moment was real, if those eyes were really there, those unforgettable white eyes. One day, a random thought came up, and I asked my mom if she remembered that night. She tells me, yes, of course. Why? I don't know. Just wondering, I guess, I said. Then my mom proceeds to say, well, I never told you this, but when the deputy came out that night, he told me they made it a priority to get out to our house as soon as they could, because not very long before, when we called 911, they received another call from someone else reporting that someone was looking in their window in our same neighborhood. Hearing that sent chills down my spine, and to this day I wonder who or what was looking at me that night. This happened just yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. I'm not quite sure what to think of it, because it was just so bizarre and unbelievable. I might have just been sleep deprived. So last night at maybe 11 o'clock, I was walking around my block. My town is relatively safe, so I didn't feel in danger. Plus it was a pretty night. I'd been walking for around 5 minutes when a pale woman with blonde hair and a white dress caught my eye from across the street. She was about my height and looked to be around my age too. I didn't actually pay attention to her after I first noticed her. While I circled the block again, she was on the same street, a couple feet in front of me. She was standing on the curb, staring at the cars passing by. It was a main road, so even that late, people were still driving on it. I said hello to her, and she turned her gaze to me. I couldn't see her face super well, but from what I think I saw, she had no pupils or color in her eyes. She just stared at me. After a while, I asked her if she was okay. She didn't respond again and simply pointed at the road. I was really confused and didn't understand. Right as a red car started coming down the road, she stepped into the car. The car slammed into her, and it was a bloody mess. The driver immediately stopped and jumped out. It was a man in his mid-20s. We both spoke about it, freaking out. He called the police, and I went around the car to see the state of the girl. Once I circled around the car, she was gone. But not gone as in dead. Gone as in she was just not there. The blood on the road was gone too, but not gone from his car. After the police arrived, they concluded that it was some big hoax of a kid who didn't know what they were thinking or talking about, and some guy who went along with it. The blood on the truck was brought to the investigation department, only to be found as paint. Nothing else was put up about it. I'm still not sure if what happened was real, but it felt so real. And I don't believe in the paranormal, but I don't know what it was. If it was just a dream or if it was real. I remember it like it was real. I feel like I can't leave the house now. I don't understand anything now, and I kind of feel like I'm going crazy. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I never was a person who had normal dreams. Usually they are pretty strange, and most of them were action and adventure mixed up with lots of things that I did in the day or the past few days. Never have I had a dream in which I felt dread in my spine, or that crippling fear in which it's usually described in most of the creepy stories. Enough about that. Let me introduce myself. I spend most of my days listening to creepypastas while playing video games. Most of them, they're about action, combat, and adventure. Usually there's gore or dismemberment and blood. That never affected me much, since it's a video game. It's not real. Your brain knows when it's real or not, despite the graphics being that good. About the creepypastas, they're very mild at best for me. When I started to listen to creepypastas on YouTube, they were about the paranormal, spirits and such, and they were mostly from Japan, so I got pretty spooked and excited to listen to some more. Looking in the web, I started to realize that the American ones are from stalkers, weird people, murderers, rapists, and home invaders. That might be scary for whom they are happening, but since I am a black belt in judo, I tend not to fear others despite the fact that I know I cannot win against everybody. But they are people. People can get hurt and killed pretty easy. So I listened just for the story. But since you are here, let's talk about my weird dream that I had today. Before you can understand a little about the dream, I didn't have much opportunities having sex with the opposite gender, so it's a bit rare but uncommon of me to dream about having sex with a girl. Today was no different. I was dating a gorgeous Japanese girl, and we went to a crowded mixed restroom. Don't ask. I didn't know how dreams work either. After some time there, I asked her if we could go to a more private place. She said she had one in her house, and so we went there together. The creepy factor started there. The house was really old and dilapidated, as if nobody lived there or didn't care about the place for a long time. She went to the backyard of the house with me and said they had a subterranean room where her sister died. She had to pump water for the room because it was flooded. As she was pumping the water from a hole, her dad came up and started to tell me how the room was. The bed was attached to the wall because of her sister's fits. I asked him what kind of fits, and he said she would usually move uncontrollably on her own, as if having a seizure while screaming. So they have to pin her to the wall with the bed. While he was telling me that, I started to feel a chill down my spine. That crippling fear that killed all of my horniness right on the spot. No way I would do it in that haunted place that was so many feet below the surface with a girl who had apparently, her sister was possessed and died. As I was summoning my courage to talk to my date, her dad said he thought it was okay and entered the black staircase near the pump. The place was dark, lacking any kind of light. I didn't want to go there, but her dad went without hesitation. While he was going down, he was describing how the place was until we couldn't hear his voice anymore. Right after that, I felt my stomach drop and became nauseated. Something was not right here. They were waking up something that shouldn't be awoken. For some inexplicable reason, my mom showed up and went in the same place that the guy went, doing the same thing he did. But her voice suddenly stopped, and right after that, the guy's body and my mother's body burst through the pump hole. They were bloody and dismembered, as if hacked into pieces, as easy as you cut a juicy and tender slice of meat with a sharp blade. I felt a deep sorrow for my mother and started crying like a baby. My legs couldn't support my weight. I didn't have enough strength to go on because of my mother. Weirdly, I mustered up some courage, and as I was looking back, my date was also in the same state. Looking in front of me again, found a pile of bodies in the same way. I felt an unnerving panic with dread. I had to get out of this place or I would be next. Who knows who were this invisible threat? Maybe her sister's spirit who had made a pile of bodies as easily as you make a pile of meat. I sprinted away from the house, but the gates were locked, and for some odd reason, I was pushed back into another room inside the house where the door was locked. I was in flight or fight reflex response mode. I didn't care about anything. I knocked down the door, and it was in some kind of living room. Of course the other door was locked. I have to break the window glass to get out. Cut my hand in some shards, but managed to break free. Sprinted away until my lungs burned. After that, I was awoken by my parents saying that a family member, who was young I dare say, just died of a heart attack. Never in my life had I had this kind of horror dream. A chill went down my spine as I was recounting what happened to them. Who knows what would have happened to me if I stayed in that creepy place. Guess I just had my paranormal story that I always wanted.